At Stray's Tutoring? Everyone, welcome to today's video where we'll be talking about the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian explosion is one of my favorite periods, especially since this is a time where there was a huge expansion in the biology and the biodiversity of many species. As you guys know, Earth had many periods, eras. And I think this this period is really overlooked. Everyone is so interested in the dinosaurs, the T-Rex, right? Or our current period that we're in. And I don't think a lot of people really give the Cambrian explosion credit. So let's dive right into it. So some key facts. The Cambrian explosion occurred some 541 million years ago, and this marked a rapid diversification of life forms. So at this time, before the Cambrian explosion, it was the Precambrian. At this time, there was a lot of unicellular organisms, very simple creatures, almost fairly boring. And of course, at this time in the Precambrian, there was an increase of oxygen levels and some nutrient changes. Now, some scientists actually argue that this oxygen wasn't a spiked increase, but it was just enough to start up this new diverse life, these cool organisms, and some which you guys will see are very scary and they're very weird. And another reason they call it the explosion is because this is when most of the major animal phyla appeared in a very short time. So you can think of the Cambrian explosion as, biodiversity's Big Bang, right? Now, again, explosion is kind of a misnomer. It's really more of an expansion. But again, just to keep it simplified, we call it the Cambrian explosion. But, in my opinion, it should really be called the Cambrian expansion because, of course, we don't want to confuse anyone with thinking this is when life first showed up. There was already life there, again, unicellular organisms, very simple. But in this short period of time, there seemed to be an advancement in a lot of these organisms in which they evolved into, some that are armored. This is where we see some of the first predators, and we'll get into that in some of the next slides. So how do we see, how do we know that this occurred? How do we know that, these weird creatures were there? Well, most notable fossil site is the Burgess Shale in Canada. And there's a few researchers and scientists that were able to find some fossils of very unique organisms, which we'll see in some of the next slides, and able to date them, as well as kind of get some 3D models. And a quick disclaimer, these are just models. These are just models that give us an idea of how they may have looked, but nonetheless, they're very, very scary creatures. So the important part of the Cambrian explosion is it set the stage for future evolutionary developments, and then that transition from unicellular to complex multicellular life. And what we'll see is we have the Cambrian explosion, we have the Precambrian. Think of it as very boring, dull, not too much going on. Then boom, you had the Cambrian explosion, and you had all of these special organisms and species that look like they're out of an alien movie or something. Then after this, we have the next era, that being, not the era, the period, the Ordovician period, where this is where aquatic animals started to move onto land, because at this time there was plants that are growing on land. Remember, during the Precambrian, Cambrian, or beginning of the Cambrian, there wasn't anything going on in land. The marine life was the way to, go. There was a lot going on down there. As you see to the picture to the left, there was a lot going down in the water. It goes down in the water. So at some point, the second period in the Paleozoic era, and you guys will see a timeline just so you guys can really understand, the Ordovician period, marked the first appearance of plant life on land. So with that, these are just some key facts about the Cambrian explosion. let's go into the timeline here. So again, the Precambrian era created the conditions for life on Earth, while the Cambrian period is when life diversified and evolved. So you can think about the Precambrian as just setting the picture. Not painting the actual picture, not executing. It's just kind of laying the foundation. You have the oxygen levels going up. Sea levels were relatively low, smaller oceans and larger continents. Again, not really much plant life going on, so everything went down in the marine life. Then, during this era, there was an emergence of first life on Earth, primarily single-celled organisms like bacteria, archaea, and structures like stromatolites. So again, very simple. Again, we don't want to get confused and say, hey, before the Cambrian explosion, there was nothing. There was something, but very simple, just single-celled organisms just floating around, boring. And then we got onto the Cambrian. So on the last point, the atmosphere, what was the atmosphere like? Well, in the Precambrian, it was very different from today. Right now we have a melting pot of different, atmospheric gases, nitrogen, oxygen, right? And at this time in the Precambrian, it was actually lacking oxygen. And then over time, it kind of changed as oxygen producing organisms evolved. Again, I think this is still being researched. I saw a few research articles on this, but there may have been a confusion with a huge spike in oxygen. Therefore, this is what caused the Cambrian explosion. Quite frankly, we only have probable causes, but not definitive causes of the Cambrian explosion. Some researchers are saying there was a boom in oxygen, but it was only enough to make this happen. So, previously we thought, it was a huge boom in oxygen, but it seems like there was a boom in oxygen just enough for it to, for the explosion to occur, but not as much as we really think it is. So I think there's still more research going on. Of course, I've been reading some papers. I want to try to find more, but nonetheless, Precambrian and going into the Cambrian, there was an increase of oxygen. So to our left, you can see the geological timeline. Of course, you have the Precambrian right at the bottom, followed by the Cambrian period, and then the Ordovician period. And this is where the plants took over. And I also think, no, that's not it. That'll be for another video. The Carboniferous period is a very, very weird one. I would never want to be in that period. They had dragonflies the size of me, and I'm 6'3". so that let's skip that. But we're staying with the Precambrian, Cambrian, and at the end of the video, just recap the Ordovician period. All right. So again, the Cambrian period is the birth of diverse species, especially weird ones. You guys can see kind of the body comparison. Again, they weren't like T-Rexes and all these dinosaurs, which everyone goes crazy for. That I think that's the time where a lot of people were most interested in, and they kind of overlooked the Cambrian explosion. But nonetheless, very, very, very weird species. As you guys can see here, we have a whole palette of them with very long scientific names in which we can barely pronounce. But what I did was, in the next slides, I'm going to show you guys just a few different ones that really jumped out to me and are some of the most popular if you study geology, biodiversity. These are some of the superstars that you guys are going to see. So first is Wiwaxia, very weird name. It's a very small, soft body marine creature from the Cambrian, about some 500 million years ago, 508 or so. And it has this oval-shaped body, and it's covered in these protective spikes and then long spikes. And of course, just by looking at it, it's pretty obvious it grazed the seafloor. It wasn't really a swimmer. So it had some sort of mouth to feed on organic matter. And its evolutionary placement is actually debated. We're just not too sure. Very weird creature. Was a bottom feeder, and it may have been tied with mollusk and annelids. So again, these fossils are found on the Burgess Shale, and it's one of the most iconic examples of strange life forms that appeared during the Cambrian explosion. Next, we have Opabinia, another very weird one, mostly for its proboscis, this long feeding mouth that it has. And again, we have a fossil here, and this is just a model. Again, I even check Reddit threads a lot of times because there's some very smart people there. And kind of off topic from the video, but I love science so much. I love having conversation, even if it's not with people who may have been in academia or go to school for some of these things. These are very interesting topics, and you'll find that there are small communities, very small communities on Reddit that talk about the Cambrian explosion, as well as all things geology and the history of Earth. And they would disagree with this model, and that's okay. Again, it's just a model. This is as accurate as we can get it. There may be some new updates for how it may have looked, but this is Opabinia, a very, very weird creature with a proboscis that really shows, weird life in the Cambrian explosion. Next, probably my favorite, Hallucigenia, very bizarre, spiny creature from the Precambrian. And it has this like long worm body and some like tentacles, appendages underneath. And, like me and other scientists, this really confuses us because, based on the fossil that we have, we're assuming these appendages were used for it to walk. So it really confuses us. And of course, there's different models and reconstructions that scientists have made, but we think that it was likely a scavenging predator, right? It's probably fed on small organisms on the sea floor, and it was definitely a predator, right? And which, speaking of predation, Waxia, again, you see it has spikes. This was, at least scientists think, something evolutionary to protect it from predators. And what we'll see as we go into the next two guys, we'll see, where we even say the Cambrian explosion may have been an influence on predation, some of the first types of predations with animal to animals, right? So then you have Morella. Morella was a small shrimp-like arthropod. Again, I think it looks very scary. There are other models. I didn't want to put it up because I didn't want to jump and scare you guys, but there are other models of this that are very, very scary, very, very scary. But it had a unique body with a spiny fan, appendages on its head, segmented body, and then some feathery limbs, as you guys can see here. So a lot of how it, I guess, ate, it was most likely a bottom feeder, and maybe even filtering particles from the water. So again, a lot of these you'll see they're bottom feeders. They're at the bottom, either eating some things that are smaller than them, because of course there's way more other organisms than the ones that I'm mentioning here. But I just wanted to highlight some of the celebrities, right? So a lot of them were bottom feeders. The only one that really was the big bad guy is Anomalocaris. Again, the model is there, but it may look slightly different, but this is what scientists have generated. And with this, it was the largest animal and a predator. It was a predator to a lot of some of the other organisms that I mentioned, and ones that are not on this list. It had a segmented body, very large eyes, and it has two spiked appendages near its mouth to capture prey, as you guys can see. It was one of the top predators of its time, so it likely fed on like trilobites and other marine animals. And its role really highlights the earliest known apex predator. So when we think of apex predator, this is what I think of. Everyone thinks of modern day organisms being the apex predator, but there has to be some homage to Anomalocaris, being one of the earliest known apex predators. So In conclusion, what are some takeaways? To the right, I have some more organisms to look at, and I think the key takeaways here is the Cambrian explosion marked time of swift increase in the diversity of life forms, and then helping highlight the speed of evolutionary processes, showing us a major group of animals laying the foundation for future biodiversity. Because as I had mentioned, with predation came, having some of these organisms protecting themselves, growing, hard shell, which a lot of them were soft-bodied. A lot of them actually developed hard shell due to natural selection and evolutionary processes protecting them from these predators. So again, it really helped us understand more and laying the foundation of biodiversity and even evolution. Also, complexity, introduction of new ecological interactions such as predation by Anomalocaris, the apex predator, and then shaping those evolutionary pathways. Fossil records giving us insight about early life, environmental changes, ocean chemistry, and how oxygen played a key role in the evolutionary burst. Again, there was an increase in oxygen, and we know that oxygen is very reactive. It's actually, an oxidant. It reacts readily with anything, very actually toxic a lot of the times, but that's a discussion for a separate video. But this oxygen helped create some of these body plans and the evolution of some of these species. And then transition in life. This marks predominantly simple unicellular organisms going to this more complex life form. And then, of course, when we talk about the next period, the Ordovician period, this is where plants appear and those aquatic animals start to move to land. And then we see the evolution of invertebrates, trilobites, brachiopods, and so on and so forth. So the Cambrian explosion is a very important period in time that is overlooked, but because I think a lot of people think this is when the most during the Paleozoic era, a lot of people think it was very simple. And yeah, sure, it was simple in pre-Cambrian, but there has to be some recognition for the Cambrian explosion. And that's what I want to share with you guys today. And finally, in closing, I do have a quote. And I just want you guys to know that, of course, life is complex. We must admit our ignorance for not understanding it. So don't trust any scientist that says they know it all. Diondremompoint. And yes, guys, again, you're very ignorant to a lot of how life works, how life is. And anyone that tells you they know it all, don't trust them, because that is completely false. This life owes us nothing for understanding. We're just in it. There's so many tough processes. I'm not discouraging scientists to go out and find out, but it's okay to be ignorant. It's okay to say we don't know. But what we do is we try to go figure it out. And if we can't, we keep trying, but we must accept the unknowing. Okay, so that's the Cambrian explosion, guys. I can't wait to see you guys in the next videos. We could talk about so many other things. I still have my bio course that I am working on. The second part should be out soon. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you have to do. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.